I saw a video on YouTube that our listeners are going to definitely want to see. Stay tuned to find out more about it.
Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about 1/3 of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. How does your garden grow?
It grows good. We just, so the 4th of July was yesterday when we are recording this today. Lots of booms and fireworks out there. I can't believe it.
It was a war zone out here too. It was crazy.
Oh my gosh. But anyway, so the good news is we got some rain, and then it stopped in time for them to trim up my honey locust really nice. And it stopped enough that I was able to do a bunch of trimming. And so they took all those branches away from me, which was very lovely of them. So the bad part is it rained and I didn't get stuff done that I wanted to get done. And you know what the ugly is going to be if I don't get those shrubs pruned. It's going to be ugly out there. But I will this week. I was out there today.
You'll get it
some
done.
Stuff. I will. How about you? You had a big week.
I had a very big week. And I will say this, it finally quit raining here. Hallelujah. It's sunny. It's beautiful today. It was nice and cool this morning. The best kind of gardening weather. Right now it's 79 degrees. It's going to get a little warmer, but not, sometimes it's 100 this time of year.
Oh,
I was on TV this past week.
I know, that's the exciting part. That's the YouTube video that we're going to put a link to. Dee on Oklahoma gardening. So good. I learned so much about dates watching you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. We're going to do 3 more segments on the garden this summer. One's going to be on tomatoes, one on the cutting garden and starting annuals from seed. And then the other one is just talking about how hard it is to garden here. And if you can grow anything, good job on you. So,
yay.
And in the actual garden, I harvested green beans, potatoes, and tomatoes. So you can guess what we're having for dinner tonight.
Let me guess. Wait. Let me guess. Green beans, tomatoes, and potatoes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure I was clear on that.
And then the tomatoes are starting to come hot and heavy now, and I'll have to take some to my mom. And in the garden, I have a bad crabgrass problem because of all the rain and a bad path problem. But I'll talk more about that in our gardening commissions.
Okay. I'm starting to see little bits of crabgrass. I got to go through. There's just the stretch of the vegetable garden that has the zinnias. I got to get in there and weed that. So I still might do that today, although it is getting hot. But anyway.
And put down a little mulch. That would be good too, huh?
No, I'm not going to mulch the zinnias.
You're not going to mulch your zinnia bed? Oh, okay.
You know what I could do? What I could do is the next time I mow, I could catch that grass and then I could put that on the zinnia bed.
That zinnia bed would love that because that grass will break down and be so nice.
I think I might do that. Anyway, let's do a quote. You ready?
Yep.
If you've never experienced the joy of accomplishing more than you can imagine, plant a garden. Robert Brault. I don't know anything about Robert Brault, but I like that quote.
I love that quote. And it doesn't matter if we know much about Robert Brault. Not really, because he's right.
Yes, you can get a lot done. When you have a garden, I'm telling you, it's amazing what you can get done.
I mean, it doesn't matter which part of gardening you love. I mean, if you're a specific kind of gardener, like if you're into pollinators, you can help more pollinators.
That's right.
If you're into vegetables, you can grow a lot of vegetables from a transplant or a package of seeds, right?
That's right. You think about that little tiny sunflower seed, and then at the end of the summer, you're staring 12 feet up, and wow, that thing's big.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter how you do gardening, you can accomplish so much more than you thought you could. Exactly. And we're still talking about flower shapes today.
We are. Today we're talking about corymbs. Corymb. Corym.
A corymbs.
A corymbs.
Which sounds like a quorum, but it's not.
No. It is a dense cluster of single-flowered stalks growing from different parts of the main stem. They come together to form a dome or a flat-top cluster that often resembles a single flower.
Yes.
This led us down quite the rabbit hole, didn't it, Dee?
It was a huge rabbit hole, and it took a lot of work to kind of condense the information. So we are going to refer our listeners to a couple of places if they want to learn more. But the flower we're discussing this week that is a corymb is Achillea, and one of the species of Achillea is millefolium. It's common yarrow. So yarrow, all yarrows are Achilleas. Some are hybrids. But we're first going to talk about common yarrow, and it's one example of a flower that is native to much of the United States, Europe, and Asia. But it's complicated because it might have sort of been introduced here maybe a long darn time ago. But that is the yarrow that you see that is white. That's on roadsides. It's all over the United States.
It is. Although I don't know that I've ever seen native yarrow out there, but I may not have looked.
You might not have noticed it. It's all over my upper pasture, and I never planted it. In my wildflower garden, I have it everywhere. It's already bloomed, though. We're done. And so it's a perfect example of a corymb because those little tiny flowers look like one big flower.
They do.
They're a bunch of, and that's why it's a great pollinator plant. Has a lot of nectar and a lot of places so that that little insect can just stay on that group of flowers and get its fill.
That is true. That is true. And so we did look up some information from the Chicago Botanic Garden. They tested a whole bunch of yarrow cultivars, which is what we would put in our garden. And we're going to link to that. And there's some that are like citronella, which you note on here has a good erect habit, consistent butter yellow. And I'm thinking
that's from the Chicago Botanic Garden. They actually said that. So I just want to give them credit. You thought, you have to have it?
No, I thought, all the yarrow that I have in my garden tend to be pinks and purples. And so I thought, it comes in yellow. I did not know that.
Oh, all of mine are yellow now. I used to have some, I had paprika at one time, which was kind of an orangey one. And I had one that was pink and yellow. But now I have Coronation Gold, which is the other one that they said was one of the best yarrows. And I put it in my garden last year.
And how is it?
It's fine. I mean, it's yarrow. I'll be honest. I'm not super excited about yarrow. I think it's a great pollinator plant and it looks okay. It's not my favorite plant.
It is not mine either. And the reason I have yarrow to begin with is because there's a series of plants called Friends of Roseanne, and it's the Roseanne geranium. And then they put all these plants that pair with it. And so they've sent me sample yarrows, and I've just thrown them out in the garden and given them pretty much neglect. Terrible conditions.
This is what they want.
And they thrive out there. And then you kind of like come across them and think, oh, I neglected you. And look how pretty you are. My bad.
Right. So that's a good reason to grow yarrow, is that it doesn't need much water. It has kind of silvery stems. And that means it's a low water plant. I mean, it's a low care plant. It doesn't want a lot of amendments. It's super easy to grow. You can probably, it doesn't like clay soils. So those of you who have clay soils probably don't want to grow it in that spot. Grow it in a spot that's kind of sandy, gets pretty good drainage, and then
very good drainage.
Yeah, because really it's that kind of a plant. It likes disturbed areas. Also, we forgot to say, or maybe you didn't forget to say, there's a word that you taught me when we were doing all this research.
So I taught you the word circumpolar.
Never heard of it before.
And so there are plants, and the honeyberry that we've talked about before, that are native sort of around the North Pole. So you'd find them in Russia, Canada, Japan. You could just go around the globe and find them, and they're called circumpolar. And so when you first said that the Achillea millefolium was native to all those, that's the first thing I thought of was it's circumpolar. And there are a few plants like that. But the giant rabbit hole that you ran down.
Yes.
The A woman, she calls herself the wandering botanist, Kathleen Keeler,
Yes.
emeritus professor, biological sciences, University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And she's got a whole story about yarrow. And we're going to link to that because it's kind of complicated, but also if you're kind of geeky into gardening and stuff, like maybe we are and our listeners might be. It's really
some of our listeners would like this.
It's
so
really
she's a botanist, and she has this blog, The Wandering Botanist, and she breaks down in botany all these different plants, and it's pretty fascinating. But you know what her post taught me?
What?
I always say I have an emphasis in botany because I do, from the University of Oklahoma, but it was 40 years ago. Or about 35 years ago. Yeah. And so I'm just going to read just this one little part quote. Okay, ready? Since botanists are uncomfortable with species that vary a lot and contain polyploid series, they often call such plants a species complex. That's all I'm going to read for you guys. There's much more to it. Taught me how much I've forgotten of my botany.
Yeah, we talked about that last week.
I was like, multiple ploidy levels. And I know what she's talking about, but barely. Okay, so that was fascinating. And the interesting thing about our native yarrow, Achillea millefolium, is that the USD plant map lists it as both native and introduced. And so she explains why that is so. And if you guys want to go research it, this is your homework for this week.
There you go. Now, the homework makes it sound like something. It's like, this is your rabbit hole for the week. And so maybe that'll be a new segment for future episodes. This is your weekly rabbit hole.
Yeah, this is the one you can go down if you'd like to. It's an adventure. It's an adventure rabbit hole.
It's an adventure. You never know what'll happen. So let's move on to the vegetable garden and our next quote.
There are those who say that trees shade the garden too much and interfere with the growth of the vegetables. There may be something in this, but when I go down the potato rows, the rays of the sun glancing upon my shining blade, the sweat pouring down my face, I should be grateful for shade. That's Charles Dudley Warner, who's a great writer of gardening. And it makes me laugh because I'm telling you, I've been a sweaty mess. I'm a sweaty mess on that episode of the gardening episode. So it's sweaty here in Oklahoma, and I can identify with, I love the shade.
Exactly. So for the vegetable garden topic, we're going to play a little game this week.
I thought this was clever, Carol. You thought this up, and I love it.
Yeah, the game is called, Is It Too Late? And so we just passed the 4th of July. And so people might be looking and thinking, well, I did really procrastinate maybe a bit too much on my garden. So let's go down the list of things that we can still plant and say, and the question is it too late? Green beans. Okay.
No, it's not too late.
It is not too late. You can plant another row of green beans. In fact, I will today.
I just did. Yay. I did it last week, and they're already up because you know why? It's warm outside. So all that time when we put them in early and it took them forever to germinate, or your green beans didn't germinate at all, it was because your soil was too cold and too wet. Now's the perfect time to grow green beans.
That's right. How about corn? Sweet corn.
Well, in Oklahoma, it's not too late. It takes 90 days, 84 to 90 days, right? So you can still do it, but you're getting close. I mean, you're going to harvest that corn in October, right? Late October?
And so it is probably too late in Indiana.
You're really pushing it in Oklahoma too. How about squash? And by squash, do we mean winter or summer?
Let's go winter. Definitely too late for winter squash.
Yeah, because it's like 120 days.
Not 120, but
maybe
a lot.
100? Yeah. So look at the back of your packet. Summer squash, I think you could still plant summer squash in Oklahoma and have some squash. And you might beat those squash bugs in Oklahoma by planting it so late. A lot of people try that.
And I would agree. You could still plant summer squash here and still probably get a few harvests towards the end of August. But I have bad news. I mean, my little squash plants, they don't look very good. I already saw 2 squash bugs out there. But let's move on. Watermelon.
Oh, rude. Rude squash
Rude.
bugs.
They're dead squash
Okay,
bugs now.
so
They're dead.
good. Hopefully, they didn't have any children. Well, watermelon. If you wanted to eat it by the 4th of July, it's over.
Yeah, it's over in Indiana. It was over a
I think it's
while
over,
ago.
period. I don't think I'd try to grow a watermelon right now,
So
even if you could buy plants.
I did plant some watermelon seeds at the end of May. So it's been about 5-6 weeks. Those things are only an inch tall. I'm like, this is not right. I got to investigate that further.
Isn't that specialty watermelon that you got?
Yeah.
It might be one of those tiny ice boxy kind of watermelons.
Yeah, but the
won't make
little
much.
vine should be more than an inch tall at this point.
Well, the plant should be a little bigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. How about peppers? Can you even find transplants this late in Oklahoma? I doubt it.
You can in Indiana. People, they will sell almost in gallon containers pepper plants for people who still want to plant them. You're going to pay through the nose. You might pay like $9.99, which is a lot to pay for a pepper plant because you're not going to get $10 worth of peppers off of it.
So here's the thing. I would not plant a pepper plant now. I would not, because it just, just buy peppers from someone else. Go to your CSA or your co-op or
the farmer's market.
Because there's a lot, farmers markets, there's a lot of places you can get really good peppers right now. Tomatoes.
I must say,
again, same issue.
Same issue, probably too late. And, I could probably go to the greenhouse and they probably have some procrastinators, tomatoes, but unless, maybe you just moved or something, you want to try it, I'd say no.
And if I were going to plant a tomato transplant now, I'd do a cherry tomato. I think you've got a better chance than raising a main harvest tomato.
I do
which,
too.
By the way, we are, So the important thing that we're getting to here is certain plants have long times to produce. I mean, it takes a long time from either seed or transplant to produce. And then on backs of the seed packets, they will have that information for you. And the ones where we're like, well, that's too late. Watermelon, tomatoes, probably peppers. Those need a very long season. And they need really hot weather. And so even though it's hot now, we've just passed, is it the summer equinox? Is that what they call it? I can't remember.
Yes.
So, yeah. Okay. The summer equinox.
Summer
once
solstice.
You pass that date, that's it. Summer solstice, winter equinox, summer solstice. Once you pass that date, even though it's hotter than Hades, the light is getting shorter and shorter.
Right.
And we know this as beekeepers too, because right now, even though those beehives the colonies look like they're at capacity, they're getting ready to make fewer and fewer because they know, and it's all based on sunlight. So
I was curious. So I did look it up. We already have 8 minutes less of daylight today than we had on the summer solstice back in June.
Right. So that's a lot less, really.
Yes.
And that's why you run into trouble. So instead, start thinking about your fall garden now.
Yeah, but don't.
Which is leafy greens. We're
not going to talk about it because we need a topic for next week, Dee. So maybe it'll be like that.
Maybe it'll be about fall gardening. That'd be good. So we have another quote.
We do. Oh, for a book in a shady nook, either indoors or out, with the green leaves whispering overhead, or the street cries all about, where I may read at all my ease, both of the new and old, for a jolly good book whereupon to look is better to me than gold. John Wilson.
I love that poem.
I love that too.
That's another one I would love to get framed, which I have plenty of those.
Did you send me that or did I come up with that? Did I find that?
I sent that one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I enjoyed it, obviously.
On the bookshelf, we decided to talk about a classic, and we might do the same thing next week because that'll help us come up with another book on our bookshelf. So, because just for people who don't know, most of the gardening books come out in October and then early spring. So in the summer, there's a book dearth. So we're talking about classics. So this one's called My Summer in a Garden. It's by Charles Dudley Warner. And we used his quote before the vegetables.
That's right. And
tell people about.
Well, he wrote this book in 1875, I believe.
And you might think to yourself, what does a book in 1875 have to do with me now? Well, everything.
It does. And so Charles Dudley Warner is a friend of Mark Twain's. And he was an essayist, a novelist. And this is actually the only book he wrote about gardening. But it's considered a landmark gardening book. And he goes through basically his summer in the garden. And it's just full of all kinds of invaders and trials and tribulations. And some of them, like, he had problems with the neighbor's cows getting into his garden, which is not a problem here. Trust me.
No.
And
but it was agrarian back then.
Yeah. And the neighborhood kids would steal stuff. That's not a problem here either.
No.
But the pusley weed, he called it, which is purslane, that is a problem
here. It's a problem here.
And I know exactly when he wrote that, it's like, I'm with you. I'm with you, Charles Dudley Warner. That one's horrible. And he's the one, and I don't have the quote about how, you need a back with a hinge in it or whatever to hoe the garden, something like that.
I remember that one.
So it is a fun read, and you can get this free on a Kindle.
Yes.
And there are reprints. We are going to link to a particular reprint that is from a classic garden series that we really like. So, and now I will say, as somebody who frequently looks for old books, there are well done reprints like the one we're linking to.
And then there are bad ones.
There are terrible ones where people like, these things are not under any copyright. So people literally photocopy, make a PDF, stick it out on the Kindle. And I've gotten some accidentally and they are horrible. So don't get one of those people.
Yeah. So we're linking to the one that is, I think it's part of, it might be the Literary Garden series. And if I remember right, there's 4 of them in this series.
I think so.
More. I think there's 4. We Made a Garden is another one. And they are all memoirs. And I love them. I would rather read a gardening memoir than at this point in my life than a gardening how-to book. I know how to garden.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So, and I always tell people, I do like garden talks, and I tell people, I say, this is your summer beach read.
It is. So this is your summer garden beach read. And you could read it, you could get a hammock and lie in the hammock and read this all afternoon. It would make you very happy. And it's not a very long book either.
It's not. So no.
It's a fun book to read.
I think I've read it like 2 airplane rides to somewhere.
Yeah.
I read it. So that is our book.
Me too. So we have another quote. You ready?
I am ready.
The poets have been right in all these centuries, darling. Even in its astounding imperfection, this earth of ours is magnificent. Lorraine Hansberry. Thank you, Lorraine.
That is nice. I like that.
So our dirt this week, I did too. Our dirt this week is basically my dirt. So I'm going to have to try to explain this. It's as hard a rabbit hole as Yarrow was. So everybody, bear with
buckle
me.
up,
Right,
buckle up. Put on your bee suits. Put on your bee suits. Get ready.
This does relate to gardening, but also to honeybees and other pollinators. So it is from a podcast that I listen to all the time called, it's called Two Bees in a Podcast. And in the name of the podcast episode, which we're going to link to, is Honeybee Waggle Dance and Hive Type Perspectives. And so this podcast is put on by the University of Florida's Honeybee Research and Extension Laboratory. So we're back in that science land again.
Yes.
And they always have at the beginning of their podcast a section where they interview somebody in beekeeping. And a lot of times they're researchers, different things. This time they did research with Margaret, and I'm probably going to butcher her name, but it's Covillion, I think, from Virginia Tech. And so they were discussing waggle dances and honeybees. And so for people who don't know what the waggle dance is, worker bee foragers, they use the waggle dance to communicate where there's a good nectar source. And it is what makes honeybees interesting is that it not only communicates both time and distance and has the precise location. And it's all done by sunlight. Now I can hear your eyes glazing over. But this is why it's fascinating. So we've now researchers have decoded that behavior. And in fact, if you want to see a honeybee waggle dance, you can look at this great TED talk by this same woman. Golly, I didn't realize that. Okay, so it's a great TED talk and it shows the waggle dance, and you'll see what we're talking about. And so what does this mean for gardeners? So there's a hypothesis that scientists are now working on that also will work for native bees and other pollinators. And so what they're trying to figure out is they're studying hives and colonies in 3 separate places within Virginia. And they're all different types of places with different types of plants. And they're trying to figure out, what do honeybees do when they run out of nectar plants? For example, if they go to a crop to pollinate it, like almonds, usually beekeepers move those bees in and then they move them right out. Well, they're leaving the bees in place. And actually, they're leaving them in place on wind pollinated crops. Are you still with me, Carol?
I am still with you.
Yeah. And this is why we actually decided to talk about this today, is that all of these crops like corn are wind pollinated in this one section that this one group of hives is in. But they discovered because of that bees still visit wind pollinated crops for pollen, because tassels on corn.
Right. Oh, right? Yeah. Lots of pollen up there.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Lots of pollen. So bees use those for pollen. And also some wind pollinated plants have nectaries. So they also have nectar. So for some reason, even though they're pretty much wind pollinated, they still want insects to come visit them. And that's fascinating. And so in a few years, they will have all of this information compiled, and then we will have a scientific research, or as they put it, measured scientific information on how to help pollinators. And it will be given out, be published for the public. And so you can actually go and look at it. And hopefully when they get this information again, Carol and I will know where it is, and we will go and find it for you. So I thought that was cool. So if you, after you read your book by Charles Dudley Warner, go over and watch that TED Talk, or go listen to that podcast. I mean, that podcast, unless you're a beekeeper, might be too geeky, but her TED Talk is really good.
I'm going to do that TED Talk. I'm going to listen to that TED Talk.
It's really fun to see. And they said that it's one of the hardest things to teach to new students is how to measure the waggle dance. And I see the waggle dance all the time in my hives, because when you pull out a frame, there's always a bee on there, and she's waggling and moving. And the direction she moves on the frame and the length and how many times she waggles says, this is a great resource, right? And then how far she goes and the angle, it all has to do with the angle of the sun. Fascinating little creatures. I thought it was pretty cool.
That is very cool. That's good dirt. I'm going to watch that TED Talk and see.
It's fun. I might watch it again because it was really fun.
You can quiz me next week.
Awesome. There you go.
All right, let's move on.
What are you doing in the garden?
In the garden this week. Hopefully I'm going to finish that pruning that's been waiting out there by hook or by crook. And I shouldn't confess it. I did get a new shrub pruners. They're battery powered.
You did?
Yeah.
I love those things.
There's a whole story about, trimming and
okay,
pruning.
You can tell us about next week.
Yeah, I will tell you about it next week. But I also hope that I've got a few cherry tomatoes to pick and the first of the green beans, because my garden's behind. Maybe some squash. I'm hoping this stuff will start producing next week. We'll see. Got a few squash blossoms out there. But I'm behind.
Why do you think your garden's... Why is your garden behind?
Because I didn't really get it planted till the end of May because of the weather and everything.
Yeah, because you had late cold just like we did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I bet it takes off this week because you're supposed to have a lot of sunshine this week. And so am I.
And think everybody,
so. That means the weeds will be taken off too.
So what are you doing in your garden?
Weeding. I'm going to be weeding.
Me too.
And I'll be cutting back spent daylily scapes, which are stems. And I'll be fixing my paths because that rain tore up my paths for the 5th time this year. And it also destroyed one of my brick paths. So we got to fix that because there were moles. There were mole holes underneath that brick path. And guess what? It's a big old cave in now. Yes. And then we're bringing in 2 dump truck loads of topsoil that we're actually getting off a job site. My husband is a paving contractor. So we're getting him off of our daughter's paving, actually, which will be nice topsoil. And we're putting it in the lower pasture because my largest beehive, it has eroded The soil has eroded right up to the beehive. So we're kind of
Really?
in clutch time. Yeah. So
So
he's, because they're down. Go ahead.
I want to go back to those paths that have eroded for the 5th time.
Yeah, because of the hard rains.
5 times D. Maybe we need to think of something else to do for those paths.
Well, I'll tell you what, you just come over here and decide what we're going to do with all this free path material I have and what we're going to replace it with, because it's a bunch of paths and it would be a lot. And I think almost anything would slide down the hill.
Okay. Well, that was just, I'm just like, okay then.
I know. Believe me, I've thought about it. I've thought about it a lot this year.
All right.
Bill's going to put on his bee jacket and put the soil back in next to the hives. And then we're going to fill in where the moles, it all tunneled down in our yard. The rain in May and June was really destructive, but blue skies now, Carol.
Blue skies ahead. So we want to thank everyone for listening to the Garden Angelist. If you like our podcast, please tell your friends about us. Also hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode.
And if you listen to Apple Podcasts, we love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by others because of the algorithm. And could you also share our podcast with your gardening friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
Yes, and be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites. And if you want to help support us, use the affiliate links, especially for books. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission and it costs you nothing.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate today. Bye until next week.
Bye.